Alright, here's a weekly chart of BTC, and I've already drawn two trend lines on it. The upper trend line stems back to December 2017, the all-time highs, and it has held as a strong resistance ever since then. The price has been unable to break above this trend line. Now, the lower trend line begins at really the beginning of the parabola to 20K back in 2017 as well, and it has held as support. The price is not broken below it. I don't love trend lines because they're really subjective. Some guys like to use log charts. So like if I throw on a log chart here, you'll see that the trend lines are different. Some guys use real bodies. I like to use wicks personally because it shows there was liquidity at that level, regardless of an order book slippage or not. But ultimately, what these trend lines show is that BTC is tightening in this symmetrical triangle here that we see and forming lower highs and higher lows, and whichever way this symmetrical triangle breaks will likely denote the direction that BTC heads in on a macro time frame. Just remove the drawing so we can work with a clean slate here. So the most imperative level for the Bitcoin bulls is this 10.5K resistance. We have this double top here on the weekly, and it also coincides with the symmetrical triangle we saw beginning back in June of 2019. Now, if the price can breach 10.5, that would symbolize the first weekly higher high Bitcoin sees on its chart since the downtrend began back in December of 2017. That'd be a huge sign, and a textbook play would be to flip that resistance and then hold it as support and keep chugging up with these higher highs and higher lows. If that's the case and Bitcoin breaks and holds 10.5, then our next big resistances we'd look at would be this 13.8 to 14K level. And we'd also see 16 to 16.2K. But really, there isn't too much price action up in these zones here. And I think if the bulls really wanted to, they could impulse up. And we could see this parabolic fashion that we've often seen before in BTC up towards new highs. I'd compare that 10.5 region to the 6K descending triangle we saw back in 2018 when the price finally broke 6K. We saw an influx of bots and traders jump in on that, and the price just flushed out with increased volume and volatility. Similarly, but on the bull case this time, if 10.5 breaks bull, we'll see a lot of traders, bots, investors all run in to be buying Bitcoin for that weekly trend change. And we'll see the news, the hype, the greed, the volatility, the FOMO. It will all increase once we're above that level. And I think that could help push it up towards all-time highs. So just note that 10.5 is the big level in the sand for the bulls. They need to break it and hold it to see a continued uptrend on a macro time frame. Inversely, we need to look at the bear case as well. I'm going to try and keep this really simple. So the high we put in last week around 10K is simply a lower high than 10.5. So the bears remain in full control of this higher time frame market structure with their lower highs. BTC often moves in these parabolic advances, right? The parabola to 20K, the parabola to 14K, to 10.5, 10.5. We're in one of these parabolas here. And when they pull back, they often pull back pretty hard and revert a lot of their move, if not all of it. So if BTC decides to pull back here, I'm going to zoom into a daily chart so you can see some clearer levels. The levels of interest to me would first off be this 77.75 area where it held as resistance there. It was support. It's the upper boundary of this accumulation range. It's support previously on. There's just really a lot of price action around that level. And all the way down to right around 64.30 where we get this bounce up before the next leg up. It's the lower boundary of this accumulation range here. And there is quite a bit of price action around that level. Between here, I'm going to draw out a box. If we saw the price break down from here and get to these levels, I think it would be prudent to set some ladders within that range looking for a swing long. Maybe we'll get a little accumulation range through here once again before we break to the upside. No one knows where the price is headed. That's why it's not great to speak in absolutes, and that's why it's important to make a game plan for both the bull and the bear side. But that's what I'd be looking for if the price does break down here. Now, analyzing the daily chart quickly, it looks like we're forming this equilibrium pattern, so to speak. We have this high, this low, this lower high. We'll likely get a higher low here. Bitcoin just loves these symmetrical triangles. And whichever way this pattern breaks will likely denote the direction we're headed in next. So if the upper boundary breaks, we'll next test our big 10.5 level. If the lower boundary breaks, that higher low that we possibly put in, then we'll first test 81.06, and then we're headed down to this green box here. So that's what I'm looking at on the daily. Something pretty interesting that I saw, I'm just going to remove the drawings again here, is where we are now. This current price action looks very similar to this fractal back here, where we get this big washout, this lower high, higher low, and then a big pump up, back down to that midline area before the next parabola. So that's something we could see here as well, where we break up from here, possibly test that 10.5, don't get above it, come back down to the midline area, bounce around for a bit, a little bit of accumulation before possibly breaking up again. It's just something interesting that I saw. Just wanted to point that out. But I'm going to zoom back out to a weekly chart and we'll do a little conclusion. So for a refresher, the key level for the bulls is 10.5, break above 10.5, and we get a weekly higher high. If the price decides to break down here, I'd be looking towards, let's call it between 7,800 and 6,400. I will be a buyer looking for a swing long, laddering in between that green box there. Below 6,400, there really isn't much support until the 3-4K level. There's a tiny bit here, but really it's in that 3-4K region. Right now, the price is in limbo. I wouldn't be a buyer here. I wouldn't really short here either. I'm just simply going to wait for these two areas of interest and make a play off of that. So that's the analysis, guys. Thank you for watching. I'm going to try and make a video every week from here on out. So in the meantime, be prudent and good luck.